Hey gamers, Maniac here with GameAccess.net doing another Tales from IT. Today's story is going to be kind of a fun one for you Mac enthusiasts out there. I don't normally talk about Mac that much in this website unless it's usually going to be negative stuff. And today's story is maybe a little negative, but not so much. I'm going to be as fair as I can to Apple and Mac enthusiasts everywhere. So the client that I'm going to be talking about today was a Mac enthusiast. He had Apple products and stuff like that. And he had one Mac Mini circa 2014 that was basically a workhorse station for his business. He was mostly using it for all the day-to-day operations for his particular business for at least one employee at least. He also used it for like music streaming and stuff like that for the office, but for the most part, this machine was a bit of a workhorse. The problem was it was very old and it was being used quite a lot. So his options were one of two. One, get a new machine, or two, upgrade and the machine that he had. Now, he had been doing regular updates to the machine. He did have the most recent update, operating system on the model. Of OS 10. He had all the updates for the OS 10 that his particular machine was using, and there was no sign that that machine was going to be outmoded and not have future possibilities for future operating system updates at that time. That having been said, the system took a while to boot. It took a while to shut down. It took a while to run programs, and it took a while to load websites. So if somebody was at the computer, it would take like literally a good minute or two just for Safari to pop up. And then once a website was put in, it took them another 30 seconds to another minute just for the website to start loading as opposed to finish loading. Kind of frustrating. Now, it did have a lot of background applications running. Dropbox, which will, by the way, if you're running Dropbox in the background and your computer is over a year old, you officially hate that computer. And by the way, there is absolutely no reason whatsoever to use Dropbox. If you have a Mac, you can use the iCloud, no problem. And that's not going to be eating up your resources. Dropbox will literally... I've seen Dropbox literally slow Macs to crawls. And this computer was using it, and it was using Spotify. To say nothing of everything else that was running on top of that. Just regular Mac programs and stuff like that. So performance was not good. But there was important data in that machine. And the customer wanted this machine to continue functioning, or at the very least, get the most they possibly could out of it while increasing the performance of it. So I did some research on the 2014 Mac Mini. And unfortunately, a lot of the information that I was able to obtain was fragmented for a couple of reasons. One, Apple simply does not offer their specifications to anyone, including their own customers, because why would they, And two, there were different, configurations available for that particular model at that time, particularly some configurations used a 2.5-inch hard drive, and some configurations used an M2 hard drive. And of course, unless I'm behind the machine looking at it myself, I'm not going to be able to tell the user what is going to be in there. And it would be very difficult for me to try to walk the user through that explanation, because they're not as computer literate. They're not computer literate enough for me to run these procedures. But that having been said, they had the fun. I had the fun explanation of basically going through a bunch of videos, including teardowns of the Mac Mini, of multiple different years, as I was going through my research for this, and I was fairly confident that I would be able to do a hardware upgrade of the machine to make it faster. From what I could tell, RAM upgrades in that particular model was not possible because, as far as I could tell, RAM was soldered. So that was not an option. And the computer was not new enough to use Thunderbolt 3. It was still using Thunderbolt 2. So external hard drive options, external hard drive enclosures, and Thunderbolt graphics upgrades was not a possibility. At least not for primary use. Secondary use, that sort of thing, that was all fine. But I could not simply just, upgrade it with like an external Thunderbolt 3 GPU or something. Or get a solid state external Thunderbolt drive and run that as a primary. If I was going to upgrade this thing, I'd have to take it apart. Now, I want you to simply Google literally 2014 Mac Mini teardown right now. And this particular machine, whoever designed it, I hate you. With all of my heart and all of my passion, I hate you. It basically graduated from the original Apple iBook school, which was you have to take the entire machine apart, piece by piece, just to get to the one component that you would think that would be the most common upgrade component. Apple loves to do this. They do it because they hate their consumers. There is literally no other reason. Literally every other manufacturer makes simple upgrade portions easily to access. And so I realized really quickly that in order for me to just do a simple thing of, whereas with other machines it would be simple as taking a drawer or taking a hinge off, pulling the drive out, removing some screws or a bracket, putting a new machine, a new drive in, screw that in with its brackets, and then close the door and with lock the hinge. This particular machine not only required you do that, it literally forced you to disconnect micro wires, custom, by the way, micro wires, not standards. Use unscrew. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Use non-standard tools to remove the main board. Use non-standard tools to remove the power supply, all in a very particular order, just so you could have access to the hard drive assembly, the 2.5-inch bay. If I was using an M2 or if that had an M2 adapter, it probably would have been a lot easier. But once I had taken a look at the system's diagnostics, I realized that it wasn't going to be easy for me. It was still using the 2.5-inch bay. So before I even... Oh, and by the way, just to be able to get access to any of that stuff, I'd have to remove the access panel, which used, of course, non-standard screws. I downloaded all the information I possibly could from the machine about the machine specs. But again, a lot of it was speculation. I hadn't worked with this particular Mac before. I've worked with other models, of course, but not this particular model. So I was essentially working into new territory. And I realized that at the very least I was going to need to have my notes and my information with me as I was to work, and as to not bother my client as I was doing this, because my intention was to do this. He wanted me to do this while he was holding office hours, while his business was open. This was before everything closed due to the pandemic. So, the world was sane at the time. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm going to have to bring my information with me, and I'm going to probably need to bring my headphones just so I don't interrupt anybody. So I said, okay. And he's all fine with that. So I drive up there, and as I'm doing just a simple glancing diagnostics on the machine, I do a full system backup, because of course, and I start taking inventory of all the components. And I get ready to start taking it apart. Just to work on it, just to as I'm trying to get an inventory of what this thing is using. And I realize that most of everything that's on there is either not obsolete or not upgradable. The RAM in there, while it was not upgradable, was fine. Everything else in there appeared to be fine. Processor or whatever, all that stuff seemed to be fine. The ports were still Thunderbolt 2, but there was nothing I could do about that short of getting him a new computer. But the hard drive was exceptionally old. It was using a very, very, very slow 2.5-inch SATA. I think it was a SATA 3 gigabits on a SATA on a chipset that could do SATA 6 gigabits. Mechanical drive, not a solid state. And I figured if there was any way that I could speed this particular machine up, or the easiest way that I could speed this particular machine up would be to basically stick a 6 gigabit second solid state drive in there. And immediately I started thinking about the Samsung 860, which I'd worked with in the past. I would have done a 960 if it was an M2, but needless to say that I didn't feel that was necessary, and I wasn't intended to use SATA to M2 adapters. I felt that wasn't really necessary. I figured he'd get just enough as well a performance boost putting an 860 in there and save himself like a couple $100 having to buy a 960, which were a lot more expensive at the time. So I make my recommendations. I say, we're going to back this thing up. I'm going to take it apart. I'm going to change the hard drive out with something fast. It's the only thing in there that can be upgraded, and we're going to get this thing. I mean, I can see that's what's bottlenecking the system right now. He agrees. So I show up to start taking the machine apart. I've got my Samsung 860 with me, ready to go, and I can't get the machine open. The specifications that I had read for the machine said it used Torx 6 screws, which are non-standard screws. Could have used Phillips screws for all we know, but it decided to use Torx screws. Now, I had a Torx screwdriver, and it wouldn't fit. So I'm looking at all the specifications. They're saying a T6 or a T8 should be able to fit these, and I had a T6 and a T8, and I can tell you, they didn't fit. So I take my very first look at the screw heads for the very first time. Again, this is not my machine. I've never worked on this machine before. And all of the Mac Pros that I had worked on, or MacBook Pros, I should say, all used Phillips head screws, which I also had come prepared for. And I looked at the screw heads, and I realized those were not Torx T6 or T8 screw heads. They had an extra little notch inside of them. For what reason, I couldn't tell you. They served no purpose as to make the screw any more secure or snug. The machine used Torx security screws. I think that's what the term for them was. You might have a different term for it. And screwdrivers like that aren't easy to come by. Because why would you need screwdrivers like that, right? So immediately I say to the guy, and I'm really conciliatory about him, and I'm actually willing to give him, because I had not taken a dime from him at this point, and I had no intention to until the job was done. And I told him, unfortunately, there has to be a delay. The specifications that I received for this particular machine were incorrect or out of date. The screws that are used for this particular machine are different than what's on the specifications that I received. And I have to order an entirely new set of screwdrivers just to work on this one particular machine. Now, if you'd like, I could stop right here. I said to him, and I was being very nice and very polite, very conciliatory. Because I was, as far as I was concerned, I was embarrassed. As Apple, I'm sure, assumed I should be, right? I can't even open this machine. So he says to me, really, he's being really empathetic to me. And he says, well, what's wrong? And I said, well, I need a new set of screwdrivers because Apple has changed the specifications on these screws. These are not the screws that are on, these are not standard screws. And he took a good look at them and he knew what screws were. And he's like, I've never seen screws like this. He's like, let's get screwdrivers. Let's order screwdrivers. Now, I was willing to pay for the screwdrivers. The problem was that I did a full search online, and basically for trusted, there were only a couple of companies that I was willing to trust online for selling screwdrivers like this. The standards like, guys like Home Depot and stuff like that. Of course, I would have trusted them. The problem was they were all sold out. But there was one organization or website that I certainly trusted, no matter, was fine, that did have the screwdrivers and had the screwdrivers in stock, and that was iFixit. And by the way, you can totally trust the iFixit website for selling, parts and tools and stuff like that, as long as they're in stock. They're a very reputable site for tools, particularly for tools that involve like Mac non-standard supplies. Now, I was under the assumption that if I was going to buy iFixit tools, then it was going to be because I needed to take apart an iMac or something like that. And I wasn't going to be taking apart an iMac willingly. But if I had to, obviously I was going to need to buy their tools. But it just so turned out that Apple had decided that they hated their consumers so much that they were going to be non-standard on pretty much everything that they developed, not just the iMacs. So basically I had to tell them flat out, it's like, we're going to need a toolbox. And I was looking at the specifications, and I'm like, we're probably going to need a toolbox that's like $35 or so. You know, U.S. money, of course, U.S. currency for those of you who might be watching this internationally. It would come out to about $35 U.S. And he was actually like, you know what? I'll buy the tool set. I'll buy the tool set. And as soon as the tool set comes in, I'll call you up, and we'll just simply delay the job until then. The computer can keep running until then, and we have a backup anyway. And I told him flat out, I said, that's fine. But I'll just have you know that obviously we're gonna postpone this job. But at this point, once I put screw to screwdriver, I'm willing to give you until, you know, I basically told him, look, I'm willing to give you a refund. I'm willing to basically cancel the job at this point. But even though we're delaying this job, I can cancel it up to the moment where, you know, I put screw to screwdriver. And he understood, and he's like, I accept that. So we wait like 2 or 3 days. iFixit ships him the tools pretty fast. I was very impressed by how fast they actually shipped out the tools. And it was a full toolbox with everything that was needed, as well as a bunch of other stuff we didn't need, but it was a full toolbox. He calls me up and he says, obviously we're not going to do this during business hours because it came in kind of late. Can you come in at 6 p.m. after shop closes, and you can work on it then? I won't be there, but somebody else will be there to basically let you in and work with you. So I'm like, fantastic. Make sure that I have the tools and the backup drives just in case. And he's like, of course. So I come back like 2 days later. I crack open the toolbox. It's fine. It's in perfect condition. I check the screws. They work. The tools that are in that are there, and I basically start tearing apart the entire machine. And again, thankfully, it's not business hours, so I'm actually able to basically follow the instructions as I'm watching. I have been flagging like a lot of different teardown videos, basically, and so I was taking the best pieces of each particular one for how to basically get this machine apart. And again, I had to take the entire machine apart. I not only had to remove the security lids, I had to basically take the CPU fan off. I had to disconnect all the non-standard wire connectors, which required very, 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 very small tweezers to I think that the toolbox came with a little sponger or something like that. That was plastic that I had to use. I had to turn things in a very specific way and then pull them out in a very specific way. I had to remove pins. I had to basically keep inventory of all the particular screws because none of the screws were the same. Just to get I had to take every single component out of that computer just to get to the hard drive assembly. And then once that was all done, I took a look at the hard drive and I said, wow, this is completely stock. This is a stock part. This is his old, you know. I think he told me that he had upgraded the hard drive once. If he did, he updated it with a stock part because it was pretty much all stock. So I take the whole thing apart and I put the new drive in. And this takes a while. This takes easily about an hour and a half just to get the computer apart because I have to be very careful. Not only are these very small screws, not only are these non-standard procedures, this can be fragile parts. I'm very concerned about the fragility of a lot of this stuff. Obviously, the hard drive, that's one thing, you know, the old hard drive I didn't care about. But as far as I was concerned, everything else down to the wires, which were non-standard, you know, the connecting cables and stuff like that, as far as I knew, were very fragile and could have been, you know, if I'm a little too aggressive with this stuff, then this could literally break or rip or something, and then boom, God knows if I'll be able to find a cable like this somewhere. So the whole time I'm basically holding my breath, being as cautious as I can, and that of course adds time to the job. Like this is, if it was my machine, I'd be a little bit less cautious, but I'd still be cautious. But this I knew was somebody else's machine. So I worked very carefully for like a good hour and a half just to take the whole particular machine apart. Once I had the machine apart and the drive transferred, I took a couple of deep breaths and I basically started, doing the backwards job, basically getting everything back together. And getting it back together was easier, of course, than taking it all apart. So there was that at least. And I took very good notes of where all the screws went, that sort of thing. So I'm citing to all my sources and everything. But basically, after another 20 minutes to a half hour, I get everything back together and the computer is assembled. I take the backup drive. I have no backup. I mean, other than that, I have no boot media or something like that. And I knew that probably all the boot media that was on that machine had been taken out when, they had all been taken out when I removed the old hard drive. So obviously this was a new stock hard drive that was going in there. It's got no media. Let me make sure the backup is functional. So I stick the backup drive in the computer. I put everything back together. I reconnect all the cables and I start up the machine. And I'm thinking I want to see at this point a hard drive question mark, like a partition question mark error. And instead I see a diagnostic boot, which I was a little surprised about, but I was pretty happy to see. I didn't know if the machine couldn't find the backup. I'm sorry, I don't know if the machine, because it couldn't find a primary, automatically started loading the backup utilities or but basically what happened is, without any prompt of mine, it booted an internet partition and basically to basically put up a disk, the disk utilities. So it automatically, after like about a minute or two, automatically activated the disk utility tools, which is what I was going to boot to anyway. So I was really appreciative of that. I check all the utilities and do a diagnostic, a complete hardware diagnostic. The hardware comes back clean. It detects the hard drive. I can't boot to the hard drive. It detects the new hard drive. It detects the backup drive. I can't boot to the new hard drive, and I can't install to the new hard drive because it's not partitioned, allocated, or anything, or formatted. So I call up, of course, the disk utility, being very, very careful not to do anything to the backup drive. I have to, for those of you who have never worked with a Mac before, who have gotten a unallocated, primary drive, and you want to initialize it, under Windows conditions, Windows will actually automatically initialize a drive during Windows installation these days. They've been doing that ever since Windows Vista. And it's actually dirt simple in Windows 10 and everything else to, allocate, partition, and format, maybe not in that order, but a new hard drive using their disk check utility. But there's only one option you have. You aren't allowed to format or allocate or partition a blank new uninitialized hard drive for a Mac, nor can you install Mac OS to it. You have to erase the blank drive. I am not kidding. And I know that there are probably a lot of you out there right now that are Mac users who don't know any better. I have seen this countless times. When a user presents me a hard drive that they say, a Mac user presents me a hard drive that they say was purchased, and they say this should work on both a PC and a Mac, and they've put all of their important data on it that they expect me to be able to read on my PC. And I call it up, and the drive is reading as blank on PC. And I say, you formatted this drive as Mac. And they say, that's impossible. I bought this drive as PC and Mac. And I never reformatted it. You're a liar. And I would tell them to their face, well, you're a liar. Somehow you formatted this thing as Mac. You probably didn't know what you were doing, but you formatted this as Mac. And now I can't read it. Nor can any PC here read it. And what probably happened is you probably absentmindedly hit the erase drive when you wanted to blank it out, thinking that that'd be the fastest way to erase everything that was on that drive. And the truth is, it is. But what that does is it repartitions the drive as Mac, as a Mac boot device. And so even though you can put all the files you want on it from your Mac, your programs, your video files, or whatever, you stick that thing in a PC, the PC is not going to be able to recognize it, or recognize anything on it, I should say. So keep that in mind. You can do a lot of damage if you don't know what you're doing with any machine, Mac or PC. So I erased the blank hard drive because I had to. I really don't know why Apple puts the erase function for... I have no idea. But needless to say, I get the drive formatted to the specifications of the current operating system, of course. And then just for my own sanity, just to make it easier for myself, I tell the drive load a backup. And I tell it using Time Machine, just load in the most recent backup. And by the way, if you don't have installation media for your Mac, but you do have an intact backup on Time Machine, don't worry, you won't need it. You can just simply install it installs the operating system along with the backup. It does keep a disk image, so don't worry about any of that. The backup does include a disk image, so you're good there. Once I start seeing that I have a progress bar on the, once I see that, oh yeah, data is moving from the hard drive into the computer itself, I take a deep sigh of relief. The machine at this point is like, all right, the drive is functional. The machine is reading this data. The backup is fine. And I had a few backups on there in case the most recent one wasn't working. I had one from like a week prior I could have used. Or an hour prior I could have used. I put a few backups in there. And the machine obviously took about an hour to install the backup, but the drive was quick. It was a fast drive. It rebooted. Computer rebooted quickly, which surprised the employee. I'm like, wow, this thing rebooted a lot faster than it did previously. I'm like, all right, log in. Logged in faster than it did before. I said, all right, now let's test everything that's on there. Music started streaming. Applications started opening. They checked the internet. The web page loaded twice as fast. I ran a complete system hardware test, which on the newer Macs only takes about 3 minutes or so. Came out clean. And then I did a system check diagnostics, and I took an image of it, and I sent it to my client, and I said, look, this is what it's saying now. It recognized the new drive. It recognized the spec of the new drive is at least twice as fast. The connector alone was twice as fast. And the computer is running twice as fast now. And I told him flat out, I can't get any faster than this. And I said, at least not with what's available currently. And the client was satisfied with everything that I had done. The employees were certainly satisfied that the machine was faster. They kept the backups, obviously, just in case of emergency. And I walked away. The guy actually was willing to pay me a lot more money, although he wanted to keep the tools. He made it clear. I told him, it's like, look, I'd be willing to offer you, fair exchange for that, monetary exchange for the tools, because he was the one who bought the tool set. I said, if you want me to buy those tools off of you, I mean, the tools work, and he acknowledged, of course, the tools work. I said, I will buy those tools off of you if you wish. I'll pay you what you paid for them. But he wanted to keep the tools, probably because in case it was like they were tools for his machine, and I guess he figured, well, this will tear apart any Mac, and his intention was that to buy a new Mac, he was probably going to want to keep those tools. So he was adamant that he wanted to keep the tools. Obviously, he paid for them, and that's his right, as far as I'm concerned. Now, if I'm wrong about that, post a comment below. But we're talking about custom tools for custom machines. Can I be honest with you? I have not come up with a job where I've needed those tools since. So obviously, it's his machine. Those are his tools for him, and he's more than willing to keep them. If he ever calls me and says, look, if you want the tools back and you pay me what I paid for them, you can take them off my hands. But as far as I know, and I keep in touch with him, the computer's running fine, and he hasn't asked me to buy the tools off of him, so they're figure. So there you have it. Do not buy a Mac Mini, I guess is the lesson of this story. If you want to buy a Mac machine, I would say just go to the store and buy one of those Mac Pros. Those are a lot easier to take apart and upgrade. They are expensive as hell, certainly in comparison to the Mac Mini, but you are actually getting a machine that is upgradable and repairable. Now, as for what's going on right now with the future processors, and we know right now that the dev kits have been going out, and they all look like Mac Minis, that the new Apple Silicon specifications, basically the new processors for the new Apple machines, are already starting to be disseminated to the to the developers. It's going to be probably around 5 or 6 months before they get disseminated to the consumers. But my point is, if you have an Apple, keep backing it up as long as it's functional. Use Time Machine and back it up. If you have to get a new machine because your machine has completely died, then you have to get a new machine. If you can get away with keeping your machine upgraded, or getting away with just keeping your machine running with a simple upgrade here and there, like a hard drive upgrade or a RAM upgrade, if it's even possible with your machine, do that over buying a new machine, at least for the right now. Because within 2 years, the Mac, I guarantee you that the hardware specification for the Mac will be completely changed. And, new machines that are bought this year will probably be, who knows how much longer they'll be supported. I would say probably within 5 years, they're probably not going to be seeing support. So if you're on the cusp of having a machine that's about 5 or 6 years old, keep backing it up, obviously, but keep it, give it a minor upgrade as long as you can keep it running. Maintain it, treat it well, because you don't want to buy a new machine right now just yet. Give it about a year. So until next time, guys, my name is Maniac with GameAccess.net. Take care, over and out.